Hello and welcome to this PowerPoint on academic writing and Harvard referencing. You'll be needing to do this at level 4 and level 5, so pay attention carefully because you're going to be tested on it next week. Now, this is a very different style of learning from the previous online session, which was very interactive. So I also want to think about your opinions of working in such a one-dimensional way. Anyway, let's get on with the PowerPoint presentation. Now, the first thing you must consider is you must be cautious and avoid generalizations. Academic writing should always indicate that nothing is completely certain. Use phrases such as "it appears to," "it would seem that," "it would tend to," in some cases, possibly, rather than saying that something is a fact, unless it is actually you've taken something from somebody who's already been published, which generally we haven't been. So you can't quote me, for instance. You can only say, or you could say experience would indicate, or speaking to colleagues it would indicate, but please don't say something as a fact otherwise. The next thing to consider is try to be objective. Avoid personal and subjective words. Don't say things are really nice, or that was really unusual, really usual, or that was wonderful, or that was terrible. That is, sort of giving too much opinion. This is factual writing. Try to write numbers in full, unless you're doing statistical work or they're over 100. It's important to avoid posing questions. It's common to see people write things such as, "What do you think that led to?" or "What do you think this means?" We don't use that type of writing in academic style writing. Avoid apologies. "I'm afraid that," "I'm sorry that," and very important to avoid emotive or coercive language. "It's a great pity that," or "it must be recognised that," or anything that suggests an emotional, that it's very sad to see a decline in. These are just opinions rather than factual pieces of writing that have been published by others, which is what you should be using. Writing academically involves being evaluative wherever possible. So evaluative being what is the value of something, being evaluative, analytical. At this level, you're not just writing a description or a story, you are trying to evaluate. You might want to think about two different theories or schools of thought, so you might be looking at different authors or different opinions, or how you would use those theories in your own practice. You might be looking at, especially when you get to your literature review, how well another writer has analysed the subject. You might be looking at which of several models is best for purpose. We'll be looking at models of learning, we'll be looking at models of curriculum, so you might be applying those to your own practice. You can put your own views in, but you must always indicate that it is just an opinion. Experience would indicate that, make it appear that type of thing. You also need to think about comparing and contrasting. You might be looking for points of similarity between different theories, between that and your own practice, or minor points of difference. You might be looking for an overall similarity. You might also be contrasting, set items in opposition to bring out different points. You might be evaluating the significance of differences and similarities. Or you might make a judgment which theory is preferred, give your reason for this. You base this on your analysis of the evidence that you're presenting. Now, when you're writing, you will be asked to use the Harvard referencing system. This is the preferred system for City and Guilds and what we use here at college. So when you're writing a piece of work, you'll need to refer in your text, in your body of your work, your writing, to material which is written or produced by others. This is called citing or quoting references. You must be consistent and accurate in your use of this and follow the Harvard conventions. In the past, people have tried to set up systems of their own, but this really doesn't work. You do need to stick to the rules as far as you can. You must add a bibliography or reference list at the end of your work, and this should be presented in alphabetical order with the name of the author, the surname of the author as the first part of your reference. We'll look at that later in the PowerPoint presentation.
If you're going to quote directly from another person's work, from another text, be that a book or an online journal or an article, you would always use the same convention. So if it's only a few words long, about up to 1.5 lines, so about a sentence, you'd put the actual sentence in quotation marks, and then at the end you'd put the name of the author, the date of the publication, and the page number if that's appropriate. You have an example here. So the first part of the quote: teachers have always found action research useful because, those are your own words, and then the quotes start when it's taken directly from a text, from a book or whatever. So you then can see that Cohen and Manuel, the author, 1984 is the year it was published, and page 41 is where we're taking it from. If you use a long quote, and I don't recommend at this level you use long quotes, there's other ways of actually paraphrasing someone else's work and attributing rather than putting great big long quotes in. But if you do need to use one, then you don't need the quotation marks, but you do drop the quote and indent it into the page as below. You still use the convention of the author's name, the date of the publication, and the page number at the end as below. You may instead, as I just mentioned, paraphrase or use other people's ideas, but make sure you reference the source. So these could be my own words. Most teachers would agree that they should be committed to self-critical reflection and that this should focus on the aims and values they convey in their teaching. Now, those are my words, but I've taken them from a text by somebody called Cart, who wrote that in 1986. So I'm attributing it, although I'm using my own words. Note that no page number is given because it might be a general idea that's in a whole chapter, for instance, in a book. Websites are a bit different again, and you need to be careful when using websites. You will be using obviously a number of online resources, and there are some set up for you in the handbook that you can have a look at, and you will be using your own. The key to referencing is it should still look similar to a book or a journal within the text. So you've got the author, the date, and the title. If you can't find any of those, then you might need to question the source. For instance, Wikipedia is an online wiki. People can add to it as they like. It's not verified information, so you can't use that. You can't quote from Wikipedia. But in the text, in your piece of writing, you only need to put the author and date, not the website address. If you can find no date, you can put ND, no date, but you will need to put in your reference list at the end the date you accessed that website. That would mean if I went and checked later on whether you had done that or not, it may be that it's gone, but it's okay because you accessed it back in February. I'm looking in March, so that's okay as long as you put the access date. You can use things like government websites, that type of thing. So then you can quote DFES, Department for Education 2020, gov.uk, 2021, whatever it happens to be. You can use that as the author. At the end of your piece of work, you should compile a reference list. It should be a single list. It should be in alphabetical order, as mentioned earlier, starting with the author's surname or family name, and you use italics for the title of the book or journal. There's a complete convention of this. We'll see that in the following slides. For the web pages, you must include the full address of the page, not the address of the site, and that's copied, from the URL at the top of the browser. Remember though, you don't put that in the text itself, you just put the author and date, or ND, no date. You just use this in the reference list at the end. Books, you can see an example there. The book's by somebody called Field. There are his initials. It was published in 2002. It's called Alternative Energy Sources. It's the 3rd edition, and it's by Academic Press, and where it was published is also needed there. Journals are very similar. You can't be expected to know how the referencing convention for every different type of text, but what I would do, and what I still do, is keep something like this nearby so I can check. So if I'm quoting a journal, I'll go and check how I would reference that in the reference list. There's websites again. You can see there we've got the full website address and the date accessed was May 2021. E-journals there, again, slightly different convention, but you can check that yourself if you use one. Conference papers are slightly different again. Government bodies. So here we have an example of a reference list there. The way it would look, note the reference, the alphabetical order, and the exact layout, and please note the punctuation. Try and stick with the right punctuation as well. Now, I want you to have a go at academic referencing in the first assignment, which we'll be setting in the next week or so. I don't want you to get too hung up on it if you haven't done it before. Just have a go. I'm not going to refer or fail your work based on the referencing at this point being wrong, but you do need to have a go, and you do need to show progression through the course, showing that you're taking it on board. Now, plagiarism. How to avoid plagiarism, and what is plagiarism? It basically is a deliberate presentation of another person's work as your own without acknowledging where that work has come from. It's quite a range of activities. You'll need to be careful that you are following the rules that are there for academic writing. It might be obviously like buying a paper from a research service and submitting that as your own is obviously plagiarism, or handing another student's work, that could be plagiarism. Copying a paper or text without properly acknowledging it. We talked about if you paraphrase somebody else's work, if you've read it somewhere, you should acknowledge that you've read it somewhere and just put the author's name and the date of the publication there. So you could just say, according to Drew 2020, and then talk about it in your own words, but you've acknowledged that somebody else has written that work. Again, paraphrasing. Handing in any material directly downloaded from the internet is obviously a complete no-no, and we have to add these days using artificial intelligence and submitting that as your own work is obviously plagiarism. It's not your work. Having said that, we will be asking you at different times to use AI for different activities, and you know that your students will probably be using it too, so we'll look at ways of recognizing that as well. And finally, always question your sources. Think about, where has this piece of information come from? Is it recent? I mean, sometimes it may not be that recent, but it's still the latest piece of information you're going to have on that particular subject. For instance, we use the Level 5 Diploma in Education and Training by Lynn Machin. It's on your book list. It was published in, I think, in 2021, so it is recent, but lots of the sources within it will be much earlier because we still use those original sources. We may use, for instance, Cycles of Reflection from Kolb, who goes way back into the 20th century. I still recommend that you use a action research book by Judith Bell, published in 1999, partly because nothing else has come along, which is just as cheap and easy to use and talks just about the action research cycle, which hasn't really changed even in 20 odd years, nearly 25 years. So are they relevant resources as well? Are they the resources that you need for your subject area sometimes? So books like this are generic, but you will also have books which are very specific to what you teach. For instance, here's a book here which is teaching maths and English in further education, so specific more to teaching those subjects. Look for relevant resources as well. Are they sufficiently deep, for the level, because you are working not at GCSE level, but at level 4, level 5, first and second year degree? So therefore, you need to think about, is there enough analysis? Is it evaluative enough? We don't want lots of description. We want you to think about how you can analyse and apply to your own teaching. Is this a credible source? We talked earlier about Wikipedia. We want sources which are from good academic publications, be that from books, journals, or online, and you need to check those out, that it's not something that we know nothing about, we've never heard of, and it's just some guru who's popped up and says something is the case, says who. Use the learning environment here at college. There are lots and lots of books in the library there, and there are also online resources which you can get through my BPC. Now, how have you felt about this version of learning? This is asynchronous. It's obviously not very interactive. It's just me talking at you, and it's different from what we were doing in the earlier session. However, you can access this whenever you like. So you could say that it's useful from that point of view, and also you can stop it at any point and switch me off at any point. So, and you have the PowerPoint here for reference forevermore. So it has lots of advantages as well as disadvantages. I'll be asking you how you feel about online learning next week. I'll also be testing you on some of the content here in this PowerPoint. So I'll be testing whether or not you have actually seen it. We'll see next week. Have a good week. I'll see you on the other side. Checking out now.